Welcome to Adapter Parish, episode 87, Valley of the Dolls. We're very sorry. Before we get started, there are two things to mention. First, let's talk about our next episode. To introduce it, let me go back to the original trailer from 1951. They came 250 million miles out of space to hold the world spellbound with new and startling powers from another planet. So began the world's introduction to the science fiction classic, The Day the Earth Stood Still. In 2 weeks, we'll be diving into the story of the alien Klaatu and his robot companion, Gort. We'll be discussing the original 1940 short story, Farewell to the Master by Harry Bates, the 1951 movie starring Michael Rennie, and the 2008 remake starring Keanu Reeves. That's on Tuesday, March 23rd. Second, before we get started, I wanted to throw out a bit of a content warning. Those of you that already know the story of Valley of the Dolls have an idea of what to expect, but for those that don't, it touches on a number of different things, including addiction and suicide, and we will be discussing those plot points in this episode. If you want to give this episode a pass because of it, we totally understand, and we'll see you in 2 weeks. Thank you. If you have any comments, questions, or corrections about today's episode or any others that you'd like to hear on the show, remember to email adapterparishcast@gmail.com. If you enjoy the show, we'd love it if you would share that with the world by leaving a rating and review wherever you listen to podcasts. We're also on Patreon at patreon.com/adaptcast. We've got a patron-only community and our bi-weekly bonus show, Adapter Parish Plus, with episodes releasing every Tuesday between episodes of this show. We hope you check it out. Show notes from this and all other episodes can be found at adapterparishcast.com. And with that, on with the show, Adapter Parish, episode 87, Jacqueline Susann's Valley of the Dolls. Hello, and welcome to Adapter Parish, a podcast about adaptation. I'm Jeremy Latour.
I'm Arielle Lipshaw, and I made Jeremy read a thing.
I hate you. I hate you, and we're done.
Oh, well, this will be a short episode then.
It will be. This marks the end of this relationship.
And this podcast.
Made me. Not only did you make me read Valley of the Dolls.
Yes.
You made me watch Valley of the Dolls. Although,
Twice.
You know what? Hang on.
Yeah.
I feel like I made you. I think you would have been content just doing the book and the movie. But then I made you... No,
once we found out it was available, I was very excited to watch the 1981 miniseries, Valley of the Dolls, 1981, full title.
That is not what it's called.
What is it called?
Jacqueline Susann's Valley of the Dolls, 1981.
That's fair.
With commercials, but we'll get to that.
We'll get to that.
We will get to that. Why the fuck did you make me read Valley of the Dolls?
Because it's so good.
Like, okay, you made me read Flowers in the Attic.
Yeah, which you loved.
No, I enjoyed it. It was terrible, but I enjoyed it.
So... how did this compare to Flowers in the Attic? Because I feel like that's the most similar thing that we've done.
At least in Flowers in the Attic, the characters felt like characters. There was intrigue. Here's what it was. Flowers in the Attic is a story about a group of people, in this case children, who have been thrust into a situation where every person they meet is working towards their containment, is working against their interests.
Okay.
Valley of the Dolls is basically a story of a woman going through life where every single person she meets is just laying out the red carpet and saying, I am going to do everything I can to make this story as easy for you as possible.
Well, because she's very pretty, you see.
Yeah. Everyone... That's what
happens.
I don't want to get ahead of myself.
Surely.
We'll get into it.
Okay.
But this is not a story. This is terrible. This is really terrible.
Yeah.
This is not a story. A story has characters. A story has characters, and characters have motivations. And in this, no characters had any motivations at all other than I am a character and I am here to say the things that I say. They felt like NPCs in a video game.
Well, I don't know that that's true. Some of them wanted to be stars. Big stars.
I guess so.
And some of them wanted to be on drugs and have sex with other people. They wanted
on
those
drugs.
On drugs, yes. They wanted those things.
I didn't know what dolls meant before any of this.
Yeah.
Because, my experience...
But, no one ever calls pills dolls before or since. That was made up for this book, and did not catch on.
It seems like it didn't.
Yes.
But my experience of Valley of the Dolls was totally, like, I find now to be completely unrelated, because the first time I feel like I heard the name Valley of the Dolls was Beyond the Valley of the Dolls, which we'll talk about when we get finished talking about the 67 movie. But that, like, has nothing to do with it.
Yeah.
And so to find out, like, I had asked you at one point, I said, like, is Valley of the Dolls, it's like an LA thing, right? Aren't they all in LA? And you're like, well, no, it's like, yeah, a bit, but like it's mostly New York.
Yeah.
And that seemed crazy to me because that ran counter to every image I'd ever seen about anything related to, quote, Valley of the Dolls, because that was all Beyond the Valley of the Dolls.
Right.
Let's just talk about it so we can get it over with.
Okay.
And honestly, I am sure that my reaction is not surprising to people who don't love Valley of the Dolls. I hope it's not surprising to people who do love Valley of the Dolls.
I'm going to make an educated guess that of the members of our particular audience who have read Valley of the Dolls, a lot of them like it in the same way that I like it, which is that it's fun and dumb and trashy a pleasure to read.
That seems to be, I was looking at, because I feel like a lot of people love the 67 movie. I know a lot of people love the book too, but I felt like a lot of the stuff I saw about the 67 movie, a lot of people's reaction was like this is camp. Like, I love it because it's campy. And sure, we'll get into that. I'm not positive that it is camp.
Okay.
But we'll talk about it.
I will say the book was a lot weirder than I sort of remembered. And at one point, I feel like I kind of turned to you and I was like, I know that I've read this before, and yet it doesn't seem familiar.
Which is honestly a wonderful feeling. I've wanted that experience for lots of books that I've read and movies that I've seen. How great would it be to be able to just shut off everything you ever know about something and go into it fresh and experience it as if for the first time?
Yeah.
Did you feel like that was a good experience for you?
I mean, it was fine. I enjoyed it.
At any point during all of this, do you feel like you were watching it through my eyes?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure. Well, I asked you to do the plot summary because I just want to ask you, on a live mic in front of our audience here, do you think that you have it in you to do a fair and just summary of the events of this book?
How do you know me? Because I did feel like I could do a plot summary, but then you said fair and just.
Yes.
And I'm not sure now.
Okay.
Can I do the plot summary I was going to do?
Yes. How much stank are you going to put on the events of the book? And how let me ask you this. How much are you going to force me to defend the book Valley of the Dolls by Jacqueline Susann because of your unfairness?
Why don't you just let me do my thing?
All right.
Ann Wells is a really pretty girl from Lawrenceville, Massachusetts, who comes to New York City.
Not a real place.
And then a whole bunch of bullshit happens, and everybody is on drugs, and there's sex, and people die, and everything's terrible. Even though Anne's fine, and she falls in love with this douchebag named Lyon, who's like kind of the hero, but it turns out he's the real fucking villain of the book. And then her life sucks by the end of it, and her friends are dead or like addicted to pills.
I mean, you're not wrong. I guess I was anticipating a longer summary here.
Well, then you said fair, and I feel like that wasn't super fair.
It wasn't fair.
Okay.
It was mean.
Anne comes to New York City in 1945. This was another thing I didn't expect, is that the timing of the book. So the whole book takes place over the course of like 20 years between 1945 and 1965.
Yeah.
And it basically follows the lives of three young women who are all like around and about 20-ish.
Except for Jennifer.
Actually, no, they're
secretly
not.
old.
No, Neely's like 17 and Anne is like 22 or something like that, or 20. And Jennifer is like secretly 27?
Yeah, she's
something.
She's secretly 27.
Okay, so it's about these three young women who all meet and all like briefly live together, which to me is the most important section of the entire book, because if not for them all living together, I didn't really appreciate them all being super close friends. I feel like that was important to their characters.
Yeah.
And if you were to remove that, I would say that would be a detriment to whatever adaptation you were making.
Yeah.
But anyway, she moves to New York, and she is real pretty, and everyone tells her how pretty she is. Everyone constantly reminds her how pretty she is. And she gets a job at it's not a talent agent's office. He is a theatrical lawyer.
Right.
named Henry Bellamy. And Henry fucking loves her to death. He thinks she's amazing. And what he's going to do, basically every conversation she ever has with Henry over the course of 20 years is Henry saying, I am going to do anything I can to help you.
Yes.
Anything I can possibly do. I'm going to tell you whatever information I think you need to hear. I'm going to give you whatever opportunities I think you need to have. I'm going to expect nothing in return. I'm only doing this because, you know what, kid, I like you and you're real pretty.
Yeah.
And that's his entire character.
Yeah. So she gets this job.
That's part of the bullshit. She also she moves into like a little flop house, and one of the people she meets in the flop house is this young woman named Neely, who's 17, and she's a singer and a dancer. And Neely's got stars in her eyes. And over the course of the first part of this book, Anne gets an opportunity to get Neely a job in the theater.
Yes, in a show.
In a show, a Helen Lawson show. Helen Lawson's another character who she's
Judy Garland.
Basically, she's the only character apart from Lyon, who we'll get to, who isn't constantly trying to make Anne's life great.
Yeah.
Everyone else is doing everything they can, falling over themselves for 20 years to make sure that Anne's happy for no reason other than she's very pretty. And Helen Lawson is a piece of shit, even though Anne she's nice to Anne.
She's
and
a big
Anne likes
star.
her.
She's a famous star, and she like really wants to be friends with Anne. Like she much is made of the fact that she's like really old. She's like 35.
Yes.
And you know her has like a double chin now because of her extreme obesity of like 127 pounds or something.
That bitch.
I know, right? At one point, Anne is looking at her and going like, why doesn't she know she's like so ugly? Like, why didn't she try to lose weight before the show? It's like, fuck you, Anne.
Anne also sucks. Like, I want to be clear here.
Sucks.
Anne's not great. Like, I didn't like Anne as a main character. Anne was just she's really cold.
Yeah.
And sheltered. And
frigid, I think, is the word.
I wasn't going to say frigid.
Yeah.
I actually don't think she was frigid. I think she just hadn't.
She hadn't known the love of a good man.
She hadn't met the right
She
man.
needed a good dicking, which she does get eventually. This is a feminist podcast.
This book is fucking terrible. So, okay. She gets Neely a job in the show, and basically there was this other lady, Terry, who was a young ingenue, and Helen was like, she's upstaging me. She's too good. She's got too many songs, so let's get her out of the show. I don't want her making me look bad. So she gets fired. She doesn't get fired. She gets encouraged to quit.
Yes.
And Neely steps in, and she's great, and she's not a threat to Helen because she's a kid.
Yeah.
She's just a kid. But turns out she's amazing. Jacqueline Susann does something in the book that I fucking hate, where she constantly tells you about how talented any of these people are, but it's in a way that doesn't really... I understand it's a book, so I can't hear them singing, but it was in a way where she doesn't really want to describe anything they're doing in detail.
Yeah.
She just says, and Neely went out and she was amazing and everyone loved her. It's like, okay, Jackie, what did she do? What was something she did? You're a writer. Paint me a picture, you know?
The way that she describes like songs, or like, it's very strange. So at one point they all go out to a nightclub, and so this is another character that we're going to get to in a second. Tony Pillar is singing, and he comes out in this nightclub and like sings his hit and sings it right to Jennifer. And the way that
we'll get to,
who we'll get to, but the way that it's described in the book is something like, he came out and sang his most popular hit of the day, which had personal lyrics in it that were about love. And as he sang them, he looked into her eyes. Like, it's, you know what it reminded me of? Like the way that it was written, in like her inability to like paint a picture was like The Godfather. Like everything was like over explained. Do you remember? I know this was a while ago that we did
the book The Godfather.
The Godfather.
Yeah.
Do you remember that? Like he came out and sang a popular tune of the day, as was the custom at the time. Just like this very awkward style of writing.
It's really I just want to be clear. This was the best-selling novel of 1966. Do you know how many copies it's sold to date?
A lot.
31 million.
Yeah, well, good for her.
This book is poorly written.
Yeah.
It's really bad.
Okay.
Anyway.
Okay, wait. So let me sum up who we have so far, because I feel like there might be some confusion.
Mm-hmm.
Anne Wells, our ingenue. she is working for Henry Bellamy, who is a theatrical lawyer. He is the lawyer of Helen Lawson, who's a big star, who's in a show.
He also used to bone her.
Yes, like many, many years ago.
Yeah.
Who is in a show, and in that show are several other people, one of whom is Terry, who we never see again. Don't worry about Terry, not an important character. One of whom is Neely, who is now the young ingenue of the show, and one of whom is Jennifer, whose only job, as far as we can tell, is to walk on and off the stage wearing revealing clothing.
That's not... Look, here's the deal. Jennifer actually, I felt like, had more character than anyone else in the story.
Jennifer's great.
Because of her tits.
Okay.
Jennifer, according to Jacqueline Susann, Jennifer has big tits.
And no talent.
And that is the only thing she has, is her body, and she keeps talking about her body, like how great her body is.
Yeah.
But the only part of her body she ever talks about is her tits.
Yeah.
And again, Jackie, you're a writer. Paint me a picture. Paint me a word picture. Do anything. But she did nothing.
I mean, Jennifer has the most interesting backstory of really any of the three of them because
Jennifer's the only one with something to hide.
Yeah. Well, the reason that she's old is she spent 5 years in Europe in a lesbian relationship with this woman she met at boarding school.
And also, her mom is terrible, and
Yeah.
she sends money home, and she's lying about her age. Everything with Jennifer. Jennifer was the one character until her death. She's the one character that I, really didn't have that much of a problem with.
Yeah.
I kind of enjoyed Jennifer. I actually thought Jennifer was way more sympathetic than Anne was.
Yeah.
Anne is kind of nothing. Anne is just a cipher. Neely is...
Annoying
and, becomes a fucking asshole. Jennifer... I actually felt for Jennifer.
Yeah.
I felt bad for Jennifer. It seemed like she actually had real character.
Yeah.
But then she dies. She dies.
All right.
I'm getting ahead of myself.
You're getting way ahead of yourself.
You asked me to summarize,
Yeah.
and you jumped in
All right,
and
okay.
started to co-summarize.
Okay, I'm sorry. I'm
And
sorry.
I'm going to get back to my summary, okay?
All right, we set up our story. We set
Okay.
up our characters.
There is this show. All three of these women are involved in some capacity. The only other character that I really want to introduce at this point, because I don't think any of the other ones are super important, even though their names will come up, is Lyon Burke. Lyon Burke is also working at this entertainment lawyer's office with Henry Bellamy. And we don't meet him at the beginning, because at the beginning, he's just coming back into town.
Yeah.
He used to work there, and then he went home to England.
He was in the war, wasn't he?
He was. And then he's out. He's done with the war. And now he's coming back to get a job. And Henry says to Anne, God, Lyon comes back. I'm going to lose you to him in a second because he's so sexy and handsome and all the women love him. But don't you fall for it because he's not a good guy.
And she's like, well, I'm engaged sort of to this other guy that I don't like.
Yeah. And anyway, Lyon comes back and he's incredibly handsome and has an English accent and he's very tan. And Anne says, oh, yes, please. And Henry immediately turns on a dime and is like, everything I was telling you about not being good to him, well, if you want him, I'm going to do everything I can to make sure that you can keep him.
Yeah.
And Lyon is just handsome, and the two of them shack up. And this also, by the way, she is kind of engaged to this guy named Alan.
Even though she never said yes, it's kind of like Buttercup and the Princess Bride. They just sort of skip that part.
Yeah.
He's like, no, we're engaged. I'm really, really rich. She dates him for a couple of months.
She knows him as a traveling salesman.
Yeah.
Because she doesn't know that he's rich and famous.
Right.
And then he springs it on her and says, I'm rich and famous, by the way, I want to marry you.
Yeah.
But come meet my dad, who is also a piece of shit.
Yeah, an Italian stereotype.
Yeah, and even though she's never actually said yes to his proposal, she just kind of, because she has no agency,
Yeah.
she just stays in this arrangement for as long as possible. And then finally, after she has sex, by the way, apparently mind-blowing sex
With Lyon. Not with Alan.
He's the first man who could ever pleasure her.
Yes.
She breaks things off with Alan.
Right.
After she has convinced Alan to basically lease his apartment to Lyon.
Because he needed an apartment. Wait, you're skipping the most important part.
I?
Which is the gaudy, horrible engagement ring. That
is it?
Yes. Yes.
I don't even think that ranks in the top 10 of the most tacky things in this book.
Like an icicle on her finger.
Anyway, she breaks things off with Alan, and then she gets with Lyon, but then Lyon says, I want to be a writer. and I can't, baby, I can't concentrate on two things at once, and it wouldn't be fair to you, so I'm leaving to go back to England.
Yes.
He's a piece of shit. This was my first moment in the book thinking like, oh, this guy's a piece of shit. And then he's not in the book for a really, really long time.
Well, wait a second. You skipped one thing.
I'm skipping things intentionally.
Okay.
There's so much in this book because it takes place over the course of 20 years.
All right.
What did I skip?
I want to be very clear. I think this is more evidence to your whole thing about him being a total piece of shit. So he doesn't just pick up and leave. What he does is he says to her, I'm never going to marry you. I'm never going to marry you. I'm never going to marry you. And she's like, I guess I could be okay with that, even though she's very traditional. And then her mother dies, if you recall, and leaves her the house back in Lawrenceville.
Hang on. How do we find out that her mom died?
Oh my God. Wait, we got to sidebar because we have to talk about Jennifer in order to talk about this.
So Tony Pillar, the singer you already mentioned, ends up shacking up with Jennifer. He has
a disorder.
Wait, hang on a second. What is he sexually doing to her at the moment that she gets the call that Anne's mom dies?
Is he in her butt at the time?
No, he's not in her butt until they get married.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
God, this is our weirdest episode.
No, he's fully inside her.
Yeah, and she's on the telephone.
Yeah, she gets a phone call because they all live together. The ladies all live together. She and Neely and Anne all live together. And she gets a call, and you find out, you as an audience find out that Anne's mom has died while Tony is fully inside Jennifer. And it
without her consent, really. Like she goes to pick up the phone, and then it was like suddenly he was inside of her, and I just physically don't know how that would work.
I'm not sure that Jacqueline Susann knows how sex works.
Okay.
I feel like Jacqueline Susann knows how some things work. I feel like there's a lot of things she doesn't understand.
Okay.
And doesn't know about. I also, you know what? I was going to wait on this. Let me just talk about it right now.
Okay, wait.
I think I figured out who Jacqueline Susann is in the book.
Okay.
She is Henry Bellamy. Because she is an older member of show business.
Yeah, she's old and wise.
And I think she is looking at the story going, I'm sure if you asked her, she would say she's a different character. Or she would say, well, I'm kind of in every character. But I think she looks at someone like Anne and says, well, if I was in this situation, what advice would I give Anne?
Yeah.
And she puts all of that into Henry's mouth.
Yeah.
And his advice is terrible. Like throughout the book, I don't think he gives her a good piece of advice throughout the entire book. But it's not ironic. It's not presented ironically. He's giving her terrible advice.
He gives her
good
money advice. Like she's really rich by the end because she just leaves all of her investing in his capable hands.
It's just amazing. I want to sit down with Jacqueline Susann and say okay, so what's something that can add drama to a character story or to their arc? Well maybe money is tough. She's like, oh no, I'm going to make her rich. Money's not going to be a problem.
No object.
And I'm sitting there in the room with her, just going give me something. Give me something that will actually put drama. And she goes, oh, I'll give you something. I'll give you dolls. I'll give you dolls. Everyone's on pills.
Okay.
Everyone.
So the reason that we keep doubling back on ourselves, by the way, is all of these.
Because you keep interrupting.
It's because these sort of three storylines, like these three characters, are kind of in parallel throughout the book. So anyway, as I was trying to say before, Anne's mother dies. We find out about it in the way that you mentioned. And she has to go back up to Lawrenceville to deal with auctioning off the furniture and selling the house and whatever. And she never wanted to go. She just feels so stifled in this town. And Lyon comes up to see her and they're in the house together. And he's like, oh my gosh, I could write here. I could spend my life here. This is amazing. I could contribute to the household and you've got money and we could just live in this house. And she's like, please don't ask me to do that. This is the one thing I cannot grant you. I hate it here, and there's a reason that I left, and I don't want to be here. This isn't good for me.
This is one of the few things that is really part of Anne's character.
Yes.
She has wants and needs. She doesn't have that many of them, but one of her wants and needs is that she never wants to live in Lawrenceville again.
And that was why I wanted to mention it in this way.
That was worth it. Thank you for that quality interruption.
You're welcome. And so he's basically listen, babe,
but with a British accent.
Yes, you have essentially two choices. I would marry you to stay in this house, but if I can't be in this house, I can't be with you at all. And she's like, I guess I'm not with you then. And he goes back to England. So that's where we are. And she goes back to New York.
Okay. I want to take the next, I'd say 15 years.
Yeah.
Maybe almost 20 years, because all of this has happened in the first couple years of the story. We're still in the 40s at this point.
Okay.
Let's just track each of the characters and what happened in their lives.
Okay, because we haven't even talked about Neely.
No, we haven't. But let's talk about a couple of the minor characters. Helen Lawson just kind of disappears.
Yeah.
She comes back eventually.
She goes to live in Jamaica.
She kind of disappears. Let's talk about how all our characters have ended up by the end of the story. Let's start with the minor ones. What happens to Henry by the end of the story?
He's fine.
He's fine. He just gets 20 years older.
Yeah.
What happens to I'm going to say Tony Pillar by the end of the story?
Okay, so Tony has a sad story.
Yep.
So Tony is this wonderful singer, and everyone loves him. He's so popular, and he's very, very handsome, and all the ladies love him. And his career is managed by his sister Miriam, and we find out they had a very like hard scrabble existence. Like their mother died when he was born, and so she's been taking care of him since she was like 14.
And Jennifer hates Miriam because her entire appraisal of the situation is that Miriam is just a controlling
really,
bitch.
really controlling. Yeah,
That's it. That's her appraisal.
And it turns out that Tony,
you know the movie Jack? You know how Jack is a 10-year-old boy in the body of like a 40-year-old man?
Yeah.
This is kind of the reverse of that, where it's the body of a 40-year-old man who's actually 40 years old, but is the mind of a 10-year-old boy.
So he's got some kind of condition that we never learn the name of. In the movie, they make it sort of a different condition, which is a real condition, but not in this book. In the book, he's just got a weird condition where he's in the body of a man, but has the mind of like a child, but it's also kind of degenerative. So he's gonna get worse, and he's gonna like not know where he is or like anything like that. I don't think this is a real thing. Maybe it is, which would be really sad if it was.
As an example of who this guy is, when he marries Jennifer, the very first place he wants to put it is in her butt.
In her butt. Yeah, he has a lot of like urges. But like we learn,
and that's kind of without consent.
Yeah.
I don't want to yuck anybody's yum, by the way.
Yeah.
I want to be super, super clear.
But
I'm
like,
just talking about it.
very important.
I'm talking about it the way Jacqueline Susann presents it.
Yeah.
Because in her mind, the way to show that someone is a 10-year-old at heart is that he wants to do it in the butt.
Yeah. So anyway, we learned that something's been wrong with him since he was born. Like he's been in and out of hospital. Like he spent the first 2 years of his life in the hospital, and like all of these things. And the reason that we find out about that is because they think this condition may be heritable, and Jennifer like sneaks away with him and marries him against Miriam's will, and then it turns out she's pregnant, and Miriam has to tell her this whole sad story in order to convince her to get an abortion, because the baby is going to have like something wrong with it.
It's going to have the same thing wrong with it.
It's going to have the same thing wrong with it.
Not something, this thing.
Yeah. Which she does. And so then by the end of the story, Tony and Jennifer aren't living together because Tony has declined, and he is living like permanently in sort of a sanatorium.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that's what happens to Tony.
Can I take a quick sidebar?
Yes.
So I feel like this is one of the things that the book has as a draw, and I think was one of the things that Jacqueline Susann was kind of her reason for writing it, is that it was informed by her life working in entertainment.
Mm-hmm.
Like she knew all of these people. What is it, a Ramona Clef?
Yeah.
Where it's like it's a story that is about quote unquote fictional characters, but all those fictional characters are real people.
Yeah.
It's just their story, but with new names. That's, I think, what this book has been called for a really long time, because like Helen Lawson was Judy Garland, which is crazy because then she actually got cast as Helen Lawson in the movie.
And had to get
Then she got fired.
But
we'll talk about that.
Talk about it.
I think one of the central ways that Jacqueline Susann would defend and did defend her writing of this book is that it was informed by truth. It was informed by reality. And I guess the thing I would say to her at this point, again, we're sitting in our little office and I'm talking to her, I would say, Jackie, just because something is true doesn't mean it's interesting.
Yeah.
And the things that are interesting in the book are all of the really salacious stuff, and why it doesn't surprise me that it was the best-selling novel of 1966. Because the story is like, there's nothing. It's a terrible story. Like none of the characters feel like characters. No one really has an arc. It's just things happen to people that are, and I'm sure she would be sitting there furiously going on the typewriter going like, but it's real. And I don't care because I don't find it interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And so what do we have that's salacious up until this point?
Yeah.
Well, we have sex.
Yeah.
And we have drugs. Yeah. And we have abortion.
Yeah.
We have all these things that are very, very salacious that aren't, no, you don't put those in books. You don't put those in, you don't write about those kind of things. But in 1966, Jacqueline Susann did, and this was something I think people were waiting for. Mm-hmm. And they picked up the first thing that everyone else was reading that was about this shit, and they just
went crazy for it.
Just went crazy for it.
All right. So we got a little bit off track because you wanted to go through and talk about the arc of each one of the characters.
What happens to Tony Pillar?
sanitarium.
He gets put in a sanitarium because he is
Because of his thing.
just doing very badly.
Yeah.
All right. I guess let's talk about some of the major characters. So Jennifer, what happens to Jennifer over the course of the story?
Okay. So she, as we mentioned, she was in this show, and then she marries Tony, and that ends badly. And she ends up going off to France to star in art films.
Art films.
In
where
France.
where she can show her
beautiful body,
magnificent rack.
So she speaks French fluently, as we know from her 5 years of bumming around Europe with her lady friend.
Her dalliance
with a lady. Which,
also lesbianism.
Yeah,
I forgot lesbianism.
That's also very salacious.
Very salacious.
Very salacious. And they're like art films, right? So she basically, again, similar kind of thing. She just kind of takes off her clothes, I guess, is the
Jacqueline
idea.
Susann loves Jennifer's breasts.
Yes.
They're her favorite.
Them.
I would say if you ask Jacqueline Susann who are her two favorite characters in the book, she would say both of Jennifer North's breasts.
Yeah. And the other thing
what I'm proudest of as an author.
The other thing about Jennifer is that she has been on some serious pills because she could never sleep. She has really bad insomnia.
Mm-hmm.
So she started taking sleeping pills, and when one stopped working, she started taking two, and when two stopped working, she started taking three, and she's just on way too many pills at this point. Yes.
Pills?
Dolls.
Dolls?
Dolls. Red dolls.
Oh, you should have said.
So the red ones put you to sleep, and the green ones keep you awake.
Yeah.
So you gotta alternate, to keep healthy. Okay. So she's in France taking a bunch of sleeping pills. She kind of gets tired of the whole scene. Comes back to America. Her body still looks amazing, even though she's so old. She's like 37.
This is what really happens.
So she comes back to America, and she meets a senator, not a state senator, a real senator.
You're just assuming I'm sure people have listened to Emma.
Yeah.
Okay, go on.
So she meets a real senator, a U.S. senator who was a widower, and he
Kevin.
Yes, and he becomes obsessed with her. She loves men children, I guess, because he is gross. Like the way that he talks about her breasts is disgust. It's like nails on a chalkboard.
Can I walk
disgusting.
through the end of her story?
Yeah, go ahead.
She is diagnosed with cancer.
Breast cancer.
And it has metastasized, I believe. We
We
watched a lot of different versions of it.
I think it's just breast cancer.
All I know is that she gets breast cancer, and the doctor says we have to do a mastectomy. And Kevin comes to visit her in the hospital, and she tells him she has cancer. And he says, I'm so glad you told me, and I want you to do everything you need to do to get better.
As long as your breasts are perfect forever.
As long as your breasts are perfect forever. And then she dies by suicide.
Because he's so gross. Because it's completely his fault because he's so gross. Literally said to her, I will always love you as long as you have perfect breasts.
Yep.
And
it's very specific.
And
there's
then
a lot of
she
talk about
she takes an overdose of
there's a lot of
pills.
talk about what men do to breasts in this book.
It's
very graphic and very specific.
I didn't enjoy that.
I would say I didn't enjoy it either. I didn't enjoy reading it in the book. This was not something I enjoyed reading in this book.
Yeah.
Because it's just like none of the things that happen in the book are just things I'm against.
Yeah.
I just don't like bad writing, and I thought everything was presented poorly.
Yeah.
Everything is just, there was no art to anything that happens in this book.
Yeah.
Everything is just presented. Here's a thing that happened, and here's another thing that happened, and here's another thing that happened, and then he put it in her butt, and then she died. Like, there's just no art to this art.
Yeah.
And it frustrated me.
Okay.
So Jennifer's dead.
And that's about, I don't know, like 3/4 of the way through the book. Like, there's a lot of book to go after she dies.
And so we got to get through this.
Okay, so we haven't even talked about Neely. Neely's story is like maybe the most important story.
Let's track her. Is it?
Well, her thing with the dolls is like the through line of the book.
Okay, Neely goes through some shit. Can you please let me try to tell Neely's story?
Do it.
Okay. Neely gets super, super famous. She ends up getting into movies. She moves out to California. But a couple other things happen. Turns out she is impossible to fucking work with, and she is addicted to pills.
Yes.
This becomes very bad. She goes out with her boyfriend Mel, who's a nice Jewish boy.
Yes.
And she breaks up with him, and she goes with this guy named Ted Casablanca, who is a fashion designer.
Yes.
Oh, by the way, I'm going to throw it out there. He's a fag.
He's bisexual.
Never presented as bisexual.
Well, except
this is
that he has sex with men and women.
But that's the thing. Like, in the context of the story, everyone just calls him a fag.
Well, yeah.
And another thing I didn't appreciate.
Yes.
But anyway,
Little
they
bi representation in Valley of the Dolls.
Yeah.
Him and Jennifer.
Yeah, they get married. They have 2 kids, but she is a fucking wreck and ends up getting fired by her studio. And he ends up leaving, and I think he marries someone else. It doesn't really matter at this
Doesn't matter.
point.
He takes the boys, though.
Yeah, and so she gets really, really bad. She comes back to New York and lives with Anne, but she is a fucking wreck. So they get her committed. While she is committed in the sanitarium, who does she bump into?
Tony Pilar.
Tony Pilar. Nothing really happens at that point.
Yeah. They sing a song together.
2 really important things happen to her while she is in the sanitarium. 1, she bumps into Tony Pilar. What is the other thing that happens?
So I don't think we mentioned it. There's a lot of fat shaming in this book. She gets very fat.
There's no fat shaming until about 3/4 of the way through, until Neely gets super fat.
Oh, that's not true. Helen Lawson gets fat shamed for having like a slight double chin.
I did. That was like just the
tiniest bit of fat shaming.
Not even an appetizer.
An amuse-bouche.
It was just an amuse-bouche.
An amuse shaming.
Of fat shaming. And then Neely gets fat, and suddenly it's like you go straight from like the single bite to, oh no, this is 7 courses of fat shaming.
Well, it's just funny because they go to visit her in the home at one point, and she says, I weigh 160 pounds. 160 pounds is not crazy, like for a woman. Like it's not that fat. And then she comes out of the home, and she's just described as like monstrous mounds of flesh, and she has no neck, and she has like piggy little eyes, but like they don't actually say what her weight is at that point. So for a while I thought, does Jacqueline Susann think that someone that weighs 160 pounds is like massively grotesque? And I don't think so. I think the idea would be that she had gained more weight. But anyway, you shouldn't fat shame it at any weight. But it is disgusting how she's described.
I have some quotes.
Okay.
So who's it? Lyon and Anne go to the sanatorium?
Yeah.
Sanitarium to
Sanitarium.
see her. They had gone out together to see Neely, and Lyon's enigmatic smile had barely concealed his shock when Neely waddled forth to greet them.
Oh my God.
She was distorted with weight. Her eyes had disappeared into the explosion of her cheeks, and she had no neck, but she sparkled with the enthusiasm of the old Neely. It was incongruous to see the childish eagerness break through the mammoth mass of flesh. Then later, her legs were still, that was page 401,
Yeah.
page 403, her legs were still good, and the black dress partially concealed her vast bulk. Page 404, she was still fat, but no, she's losing weight on this tour that they have her go on. She gets a comeback tour.
Yeah.
They get her out of the sanitarium, and they're like, okay, she's not going to do movies, but she's going to do shows. We're going to get her on stage. We'll travel with her, and she'll lose weight. She was still fat, but no longer grotesque. Christine had pummeled off 30 pounds. Christine is her live-in nurse.
Her Swedish masseuse.
Yeah, so that was fucked up.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I guess my sidebar on this, and this, I guess, falls into the segment you'll understand someday.
Mhm.
So she has like these twin boys, and I was upset with how badly she treated them and seemed not to care about them.
Yeah.
They're not in it very much, but she was a very neglectful mother, and I didn't like that.
I know.
Yes.
So anyway, before we end Neely's story, let's talk about Anne's story. So Anne finally does the one thing. After years of people telling her how pretty she is, she finally does the one thing that everyone's been telling her to do. She models.
Mm-hmm.
She decides to model, and within a single evening, I would say probably no more than 48 hours of deciding she wants to model, she becomes the most famous model in the country.
Yes.
Known far and wide.
She signs up to be like the spokesmodel for like like makeup.
She becomes the Gillian Girl.
The Gillian Girl.
I'm assuming. Or Gillian Girl. I don't know.
Yes. And she also forms a sexual relationship with the CEO of the company, which is it's useful in these cases.
I guess so. And also gross.
Yeah, it is gross. Like she just keeps forming these relationships with like falling into these relationships with men that she does not care about and not caring. And she's with this guy for like 10 years.
This leads to my favorite moment in the entire book. Just with how pitiful it is. Because she's with Kevin for all this time, never loving him. Lyon comes back, and Anne cannot be helped. And she goes to be with Lyon. Immediately. And Kevin knows about this, and he is a wreck and calls her at Lyon's place. He calls Lyon and says, put her on the phone, and he is a blubbering, whining mess. He wants her back so badly, and it is the saddest thing I have ever read at all. Because none of these people deserve each other. None of these people should be together.
Or perhaps they do deserve each other.
There wasn't a single relationship I was rooting for in the entire book. Not a single one. All these people are terrible.
Mm-hmm.
Even Anne.
Yeah, Anne's terrible.
Even Anne.
So
Jennifer's the only one who's not terrible.
yeah. I was rooting for Jennifer and her girlfriend back at the beginning. I was like, maybe they just stay together.
No, her girlfriend was terrible.
Her girlfriend was terrible.
She
no,
was
you're
the
right.
fucking worst. She was a
like-
predator.
yeah, you're right. She was a predator. She was like
Not
she was
because not by not because she was gay.
no. I mean, that's a like a dime novel stereotype is like
Yeah.
this predatory lesbian, and that's exactly what she was.
Yeah, and that bums me out
Yeah.
too. That's just so many things in this book that bum me out.
Yeah.
So anyway, Lyon comes back. Anne wants to be with him, so they get back together. They do get back together.
They do get back together, and they do get married.
Right. But then I mentioned before, Neely goes on tour. This was orchestrated by Lyon Burke.
Yes.
And
Because he's working for Henry again.
Yeah, while they are on tour, Lyon and Neely shack up
Continually.
a lot.
And it sort of is like his job. Like his job is kind of to keep her happy. Then like as they hire on more, because now it's more of a talent agency, and as they sort of hire on more like ingenues to manage, like his job is basically to like usher them all around town and sleep with them and keep them happy. And by this point, Anne has had a baby.
Mhm.
So she's supposed to be just home with the baby and not knowing that all this is going on. But like Neely is like basically her best friend, and he's like blatantly sleeping with her, just like not coming home and like coming home and pretending he's been home all night. Like just like he's acting horrible,
Yeah.
and so is Neely. She's awful.
And then by the end, and this is one of my biggest problems with the book, I felt that the ending of the book was arbitrary. I felt like the book literally could have ended at any point
Mm-hmm.
because there was nothing about the ending that I thought meant anything. It was just a terrible thing happens 3 chapters to the end, then a terrible thing happens in the end of, the second chapter to the end, and then a terrible thing happens at the end of the last chapter. You could have ended on any of those and it still would have left me with the same feeling about these characters. But basically, does Anne put it to him to like choose, or someone does?
She's like she knows, and he's like, yeah, there's nothing you can do about it. Like, I guess you can leave if you want. And she's like, but I don't want to. I love you. And so she just sort of has to make up her mind to stay, and then because of her daughter. And then it ends with her going, like, literally the last line of the book is something like, well, at least she'd always have those wonderful dolls. Like,
Yeah.
that's the end. Anne and her sleeping pills.
Because Anne's taking sleeping pills now.
Right,
It takes her
'cause
forever.
Anne took 20 years to take a sleeping pill.
Yeah, but now she's
But now
addicted. And then
loves them.
the book ends. There's a party happening at their house, and the baby's asleep. I don't understand this.
How could the
We-
baby be
I
asleep?
don't understand how the baby could be asleep.
Because it's not a big house, it's like a New York apartment.
Maybe this was back when they gave like bourbon to babies to make them sleep or something like that.
Or just,
I don't know.
it's not real.
Doesn't matter. Well, yes, it's also like a poorly written story. So yes, I shouldn't analyze it too much. And yet here we are 40 minutes in.
Yeah.
So at the party, Anne decides to slink off to the bedroom because she's too tired. And while she is in the bedroom, Lyon sneaks in with a young lady.
Not Neely, a different young lady.
And they're doing
Canoodling.
They're canoodling, and then they leave the room, and the book ends with Anne, I think, on the floor with her pills,
Yeah.
with her dolls. Sorry, knowing that this is what her life is,
Yes.
and it's very sad.
It's very sad.
But like sad without a point.
yeah.
I guess it's just at the end. I just imagine closing the book. I feel like I developed a relationship with the Jacqueline Susann in my head. Like she's not the real Jacqueline Susann. She's just what I imagine her to be. I feel like I really developed a relationship with her throughout the course of the story because I kept looking at her in my mind every time I would read something and go like, "What are you doing? What is this bullshit?"
do you
And then
think-
at the very end, I just closed the book. And in my mind's eye, looked over at this imaginary Jacqueline Susann I had created, and she looked at me with this look as if to say, "Uh-huh.
I did that.
How about that book, huh? How about that ending? I'm a writer."
I just wonder if she thinks like the audience is going to think, well, that was terrible and Anne made a lot of bad choices, or if they're going to think like, she did get the husband and baby. That was what she wanted. That was what she wanted the whole time. She wanted to get married and have a baby, and she got it. And she's going to have to live with it.
Yeah. I just feel like this book was the definition of presented without comment.
Yeah.
Just like, here's a bunch of terrible things that happen
Oh,
with
yeah.
no real point.
Oh, and this was the other you'll understand someday. The whole thing that like the baby was born and he like never came to see her. Like
That was fucked up.
he was in California, and like he finally came home, and like he had never even seen the baby, and he's like, all right, well, I'm leaving in the morning. And she's like, oh, I thought we'd like spend some time as a family. And he just basically never lived with her like after she had the baby. Like
Mhm.
basically never was there. And that was very That was, as someone that's had a baby, that was very upsetting.
Yeah, I feel like Helen Lawson was really presented as the villain of the book for most of the book.
Yeah.
Lyon Burke is the villain of the book. He's fucking terrible.
Yeah.
He's the worst person. I want to stop talking about this book.
Okay.
We gotta breeze through these movies a little bit because
All
we
right.
spent a lot of this does repeat,
Yeah, well, I thought maybe when we talk about the movies, we could just talk about maybe the things that are different.
which is actually a lot now that I
Yeah.
think about it. Anyway, I just want to say one last thing before we end the book. I feel like, I've been very negative on it, and I feel bad about that because I don't like being super, super shitty about something. But I feel like this book has armor, and the armor is the fact that it has sold 31 million copies.
Yeah, so it's
Like,
doing okay.
This book is doing great.
Like, nothing Jeremy says is going to take this book down.
No, like I'm not trying to convince the millions upon millions of people that enjoy this book and bought this book that they're wrong. Like, people enjoy books, people enjoy things. That's totally fine.
Like what you like.
This book can stand up to the scrutiny of like just this jerk on his show being shitty about it.
Yeah.
But I fucking hated this book.
I'm so sorry.
I love you,
I'm
but
so
why
sorry.
did you do this to me?
Because I thought it would be fun.
1 year later, they made a movie. Do you know who apparently wrote the first draft of the screenplay for this movie?
Jacqueline Susann.
No.
Oh.
Harlan Ellison.
Oh.
Yeah.
Good for him.
But then he decided he wanted to be uncredited. He wanted his name removed from the credits because of the ending. So the final credits go to Helen Deutsch and Dorothy Kingsley.
Cool.
Because let's just skip to the end.
Okay.
It doesn't matter what order we talk about things in because the story is the story.
Right.
What is the big difference between the ending of the movie and the ending of the book? Because as you said in the book, like Anne and Lyon get married, they have a baby, and they're in New York, and he's still cheating on her.
Yeah. So in the movie, I don't think they actually ever got married. They're living together in California. And Anne realizes that Lyon's cheating on her with Neely and like everything's terrible, and he's like flying back and forth, and she's in this like house by herself. It's all very A Star Is Born. So the movie ends actually with her coming back to Lawrenceville and basically like saying like, I never should have left and I need to come back to where I began to like find myself.
But wait, who's that knocking at the door?
And here comes Lyon to apologize, I guess.
And propose.
Yes.
Because they never got married.
Yes, that's
and
right.
She says to him, no,
Sends him away.
nay, I say.
Sends him away.
And I'm going to go take a walk in the frozen woods.
Without my coat.
And I'm going to pick up this stick. I'm going to swing this stick around, and then the credits are going to roll.
That's the end.
Which is fucking bullshit.
The
The music is terrible. The music sung by Dionne Warwick. Okay, so I have a question. I know the thing we talk about constantly is like, you can change things in an adaptation. That's totally fine.
Mhm.
Anne is like not much of a character in the book.
Yeah.
She's there the whole time, but she is nothing. She is nothing. There's nothing happening inside her head other than, I don't know about that. That's my impression of the entire character of Anne Wells.
I don't know.
I don't know. I don't know. But there are few things. There are a couple of things she feels strongly about.
Yes.
Lyon Burke. How does she feel about Lyon Burke?
Loves him.
Loves him. Even though he treats her like shit, she loves him. She feels strongly about it. Her friendship with Neely and Jennifer.
Loves him.
Loves them. That is a thing that is important to her. Living in Lawrenceville.
Hates it.
Hates it and never wants to do it. It's probably the thing she feels strongest about of anything in the book.
Yes.
So if you throw that out for the movie,
Where are you?
why now? Anne is less of a character in the movie than she is in the book.
Yeah.
Anne in the movie is nothing.
Yeah.
She is nothing.
Yeah. So we have Anne, played by
Barbara Perkins.
Barbara Perkins, and she's kind of nothing, as you say.
She's nothing.
And
nothing.
So it's the three ladies, right? It's Anne, it's Neely, played by Patti Duke.
Just one of her.
Yes.
Just one of her.
I
think
saw,
famously she would always play two people.
I saw an interesting interview with her, and I wish I could have found it to watch again. But she was kind of looking back on it. Her attitude seemed to be, yes, I understand now at this point that my performance was a little bit over the top. They played for her the scene that she's like screaming in the alleyway. Like
this was the scene that was going to win her Oscar.
Yeah, she's like, I'm Neely O'Hara. She's like screaming. Neely O'Hara. I don't think we even said her full name. Neely O'Hara. Patti Duke was coming off of the Patti Duke show, so she was like, I picked this role because I really wanted to do like an adult role. Like I didn't want to be seen as a teenager. I wanted to do like a really serious, meaty role.
Sex and drugs.
And I think from what I could glean from that interview, she was sort of basically saying like, I was not ready for it. And she was also having a lot of like mental health problems. I believe she's bipolar. And I think that was all kind of like coming to the forefront like while they were making this movie. So she was actually really struggling as she was trying to portray this actress that was really struggling. So interesting parallel there.
Yes, I agree. But would you like to talk about our third lady?
Yes. So the third lady, this is unfortunate because at one point you turned to me as we were watching this movie and said, "I hate you." And I said, "That's mean. Why?" And you said, "Because you made me watch this and it's going to force me to speak ill of the dead."
Yep.
Because Jennifer is played by Sharon Tate, R.I.P. Again, sort of an interesting parallel in that her body is banging.
Sharon Tate's gorgeous.
Her breasts are amazing, and on full display.
It's funny, while you were talking, I was pulling up quotes from the movie, and one of the first ones that pops up is Neely saying, "Boobies, boobies, boobies, nothing but boobies. Who needs them? I did great without them."
There you go. Her body is banging in this movie, and her acting is not as good. And it's just funny because through the whole book and the whole movie, Jennifer's whole thing is like, I don't have any talent. I know I don't have any talent. I just have a really good body. So I just have to like exploit the fact that I have a great body to my benefit. And I don't know if that's something that Sharon Tate felt, but by all accounts, Sharon Tate was like the sweetest person in the world, like so kind and thoughtful, just like Jennifer, but like her acting is a little wooden. I would say just a little. Her line deliveries are just a little flat.
You're being incredibly generous, and
Okay.
this is why I hate you, because as I said, you're going to make me speak ill of the dead.
Viciously murdered
this
this
is
woman.
one of the worst performances I have ever seen. It is truly terrible.
Okay.
Truly, truly terrible, and it really bums me out to say that.
Okay.
But I got to call it the way I see it.
Horribly murdered by the Manson family. Sharon
I know,
Tate.
and it's awful, and I hate that, and I don't want that. I don't want that to be part of this conversation, and yet it has to be because it happened.
Yeah.
I do want to take back something I said before.
Yeah.
I feel like this wasn't that well thought out. I said I wasn't sure the movie was camp. And I feel like I'm not sure the movie is the kind of camp that I enjoy.
Yeah.
I almost feel like it's not campy enough.
Yeah.
It is campy.
It is campy, and I think like it's just like the lines that are so famous are the campiest lines. Like the part where, so we didn't talk about this in the when we talked about the book, but there's this like really climactic scene where Neely and Helen Lawson like have a physical altercation in a bathroom, and Neely snatches her wig.
And the way it's described in the book is like Helen's hair is gross.
Like it's all fallen out.
Because it's all fallen out because she had dyed it too many times and it all fell out. It's patchy and gray and awful, and like it sounds like
terrible.
It sounds terrible. It's the kind of thing where like she could not walk out and like have people see her like that because it is horrifying, like quote unquote horrifying.
Yeah. But so they're having this altercation. First, it's a verbal altercation, and
as most altercations start that way.
Helen Lawson, played by Susann Hayward, is sort of taunting Neely.
What?
Yes. Well, she's not played by Judy Garland.
We made a whole big hairy deal about how Judy Garland was going to play Helen Lawson in the movie.
She got fired.
Oh, no.
Fired from the movie
for
doing too many pills and booze.
It seems like, though, I looked into it a little bit, and we could have if we started doing a ton of research on this, it never would have ended.
Yeah,
because people fucking love Valley
There's
of the Dolls.
so many like little documentaries and things that you can watch. Like there's books written on this movie. Like it's crazy.
I don't want to just repeat what everyone else has already said, but I did see a little bit that seemed to give me the impression that Judy Garland was set up to fail.
That's probably true.
And that they wanted her casting for the movie studio wanted her casting for the publicity, but they didn't want to work with her.
Yeah.
So apparently they like scheduled her shooting to be like at the end of the day. They kept her around all day to shoot at the end of the day, knowing that she would get trashed.
Yeah.
And that they would have call to fire her.
Yeah.
And then they cast, as you say, Susann Hayward.
Yeah. So the whole thing about the difference in the character of Helen Lawson versus Neely O'Hara is like Helen is a theater actress, and like there's a level of professionalism in theater that is but like this is played up in the book that you have to be more professional in theater than in film, and B, also literally true. Like you physically have to be able to perform 8 shows a week if you're doing theater. Whereas if you're totally trash doing a movie, they can kind of cut around it, like to some extent.
They can fix it in post.
They can fix it in post. And we're told like over and over again, like Helen is really difficult. She's really hard to work with, but like by God, she's never been late to a rehearsal and she's never missed a performance in her entire career. It makes me think of Patti Lupone because I hear all these stories about how Patti Lupone like famously is like difficult to work with, but like every story I've ever heard about her, and I think I might have said this on the podcast before, every story I've ever heard about her, even if it's meant to be like, oh, Patti Lupone, so difficult, so hard to work with, like really seems like her just being like, I am a goddamn professional and everyone around me is required to be so as well. And if you're fucking around, you cannot be in the rehearsal studio with Patti. And I really admire her for that. Love Patti Lupone.
I know that you do.
So anyway, Helen Lawson has this amazing line, Broadway doesn't go for pills and booze, which is not true. But so amazing.
I think
it's
that's
so campy.
It is definitely my favorite scene in the movie.
Yeah.
Because
and then
of
she gets
that,
her wig snatched.
She gets her wig snatched, and I just described how awful she looks in the book. Let me ask you this. When her wig gets snatched off in the movie, how does Susann Hayward look?
Amazing.
Looks fucking great.
She goes from a redhead to a platinum blonde.
Her hair's not gray.
It's blonde.
It's platinum blonde.
Yeah. And she looks so good. And it's like, you look great. And like, there's this whole thing where like the bathroom maid has to come up to her and go like, oh, Miss Lawson, I can't believe they did that to you. Like, I'm so sorry. Like, is there anything I can do to help? And she's like, I will walk out of here the way I came in, with dignity. And she like ties her scarf around her head or whatever. But it's like, no, just walk out there. You look great, dude. Like, you look great.
Looks fantastic.
So anyway, I'm sorry. This is like a gigantic sidebar. Where were we going?
We were just kind of talking about some of the differences. We really skipped to the end with this one.
Yeah, we skipped to the end.
And like, I guess most of the movie, here's the thing about the movie that I found interesting as we were watching it. It is very, very streamlined. They cut tons of shit out of it.
They cut so much. They really needed to get to like the dramatic parts because there's so much in the book that happens before it gets dramatic. Like you're a good 50%. Like Jacqueline Susann takes her sweet time, like setting everybody up to fail essentially, and you're probably halfway through the book before anybody starts getting into real trouble.
Yeah.
In the movie, they really streamline it. They go fast and hard to like everybody is fucking shit up for themselves almost immediately.
Yeah, I feel like I'm going to give one example of something, and it is on its own not really that much and kind of an interesting choice, but it is, I would say, kind of emblematic of all of the changes that are made to it. So Terry, we talked about briefly.
Yes.
I would say she's the lady not appearing in this film.
Not in the movie.
Because she's not in it. Just as she got cut from the show in the book and Neely stepped in to replace her, she was pre-cut. She was not even in it.
What a cruel parallel.
So basically, I mean, here's the thing. If you want to be an economical with your screenplay and you want to cut down the book, well, you've got this story where, okay, so you've got Helen in the play and she's in there with this ingenue named Terry, and she gets Terry cut from the show, and then Neely steps in, and that's Neely's big step to start. Okay, no, here's how we cut this down, and we have fewer actors. Terry's not in it anymore. Neely's the ingenue who Helen gets cut from the show, and that's how we meet her. Like, okay, sure, that's fine.
And then she goes on to be an even bigger star.
Right. But my issue with that, not even issue, but the thing that I found interesting is like, that's one of 100 choices throughout. Like, I just picked that one randomly.
Yeah.
There are so many things in this story that are cut down. And I would say maybe cut down so much that I don't even understand what the point is anymore.
Yeah.
Because kind of the way things happen over the course of time in the book is one of the only things that felt interesting about it, and that's all gone.
Yeah.
The movie takes place over the course of like a couple of years.
Yeah, a couple years. Yeah, because the book is over like 20 years, and the movie is condensed into like, I don't know, 5 maybe,
if that.
And like the unfortunate thing is like a lot of the stuff in the book that's so salacious, because this is still the 60s, they couldn't show in the movie, so it's like even less shocking.
Yeah.
Like there aren't any sex scenes really at all. There's definitely still
Tony doesn't put it in Jennifer's butt once.
He does not.
Not once.
Not even at all. So in the movie, they've made Tony have a real disease. They've given him Huntington's chorea, which is a very, very bad degenerative disease. It's what Woody Guthrie died of. Did you know that?
I was going to say it's what Olivia Wilde had in House.
Oh, well, there you go.
Basically the same thing.
Yeah, it's basically the same thing. So anyway, it's a really bad disease. There's a test for it now, but there didn't used to be. So the scary thing
That's
about
how Olivia Wilde knows that she has it in House.
Right. So like what it used to be was that, so it's the kind of thing where it is really, really strongly genetically linked. It's like 50-50, but the symptoms don't appear until you're much older and probably have already had kids. So essentially what used to happen is your kids would grow up like not knowing if they were going to die horribly the way they saw their parents die. This happened to Arlo Guthrie.
Basically, from what I remember, she's talking to House about her dad, and I think they kind of get the idea that her dad probably had it.
Yeah.
So then she gets the test, and it turns out it's positive, and it really changes her character arc for the rest of the show. House is really good, by the way.
Anyway, we're not talking about House.
I'm talking about
So
House.
anyway, Tony's got Huntington's chorea, which is how Miriam talks Jennifer into getting an abortion, but we don't even know that she's doing it at the time. We hear about it like way later. Like Neely says to Anne, yeah, Jennifer called me and asked me where she could get an abortion. And that's like kind of all we hear about it.
Yeah.
So there's no sex really. There's certainly no same sex.
No, God, no.
Other than calling people fags
in a movie,
in cruel ways.
In a movie, no, not in '67.
Was Neely like really cast it up to her now husband Ted Casablanca, who's cheating on her, that he's bisexual, and he's like, I mean, that was like a lady that you just saw me banging in our pool. Like, Jesus Christ.
This is amazing.
These
amazing
people
writing.
are the worst.
Can I get back to something? I feel like there was something I neglected to say about the example that I gave of storytelling where they kind of condense the whole like Neely thing and make her the ingenue. This actually removed one of the only things I really liked in the book.
What was that?
Which is that the whole beginning of the book is in so many ways defined by Anne's relationship with Neely.
Mm-hmm.
They're friends.
Yes.
It's their friendship that brings them together. It's their friendship that brings Neely into the story of the book and makes her a star. In this, Neely's already doing that. So like her relationship with Anne doesn't mean anything. And they kind of don't have a relationship.
Well, not only do they not have a relationship, at one point, like Anne and Jennifer, I think, are having dinner together with their respective men. And you turned to me and you were like, how do they even know each other? And I was like, oh, but well, you see, of course oh. And like, we were like, wait, how do they even know each other? They don't.
The thing that I love in the book most was like the period of time where the three of them lived together.
And they never lived together.
Not once in the movie.
Yeah.
And it's, why would you remove that? That's the thing.
Something must have gotten cut because it doesn't make sense.
Well, no, I understand why they would remove it because the point of the story was never about the characters.
Yeah.
The point of the story is we want to see Sharon Tate in a bathing suit. We want to see Sharon Tate in a bathing suit. We want to see Patty Duke get fucked up. And we want to. Yeah, well, except no one's singing with their real voice.
Yeah, and also, side note, the songs in this are terrible.
They're awful. It's really just dog shit. It's terrible, terrible, terrible stuff. Like we haven't even talked about Lyon Burke. He's
nothing. He's basically nothing.
Played by Paul Burke, which
God.
is always funny to me. Who we saw, he was in the Thomas Crown Affair.
Good.
He's fine. Not British, but like
not even a little.
He's kind of like an old craggy. He looks like he should have come out of film noir or something like that. But here he is in 1967. I can't even remember so many of the people from this.
Anne doesn't have a baby. Neely does end up in the sanitarium, but does not get fat.
No.
I guess they didn't want to make Patty Duke like wear a fat suit or whatever.
Jennifer does die by suicide.
She does die by suicide, but she never. It's not as clear what drove her to it because the senator is not in this.
Yeah.
So it's like it's all within her. And like the thing that I find so sad about her story is like she literally loved someone that said the absolute wrong thing at the absolute wrong time and completely ruined her confidence. Like essentially like at her absolute most vulnerable, reinforced for her this idea that she had been fed all of her life that the only thing that was of value about her was her breasts.
Yeah.
Like not even like her body, but specifically her breasts. And that was what drove her to suicide. And that's really sad in the book, but like you can kind of see what the sequence of events is that leads her there. And in the movie, it's just like she just kind of suddenly gives up, and it makes her seem, I don't want to like cast aspersions on like people that die by suicide, because like obviously that happens for all kinds of reasons and it's always very, very sad, but like it doesn't connect the dots in the way that her plot line does in the book. Does that make sense?
But you're not talking about real suicide right now. You're
I'm talking about movie suicide.
Movie suicide,
yeah.
And fictional suicide, and like suicide in a movie isn't suicide in real life.
Yeah,
suicide in a movie it's fiction.
Yeah.
It can have meaning, it can have subtext, it can have so many different things. It can be a metaphor for something else. Like it can be so many different things. And how appropriate is it that one of the first people we see after Jennifer dies is Jacqueline Susann playing a reporter,
asking Anne like, what did you do?
Yeah. I don't know. I guess I don't have that much else to say about the movie. Can I run through three things really quickly that I have to say about this movie? One, I bet if I watched it 10 or 15 more times, I'd really enjoy it.
I mean, I think it's really fun. I would watch it again tonight.
I bet if I watched it again, I would have fun with it.
Yeah.
Because I would go into it knowing I don't have to take a single part of it seriously.
Yeah.
I bet I wouldn't hate it as much the second time, and I bet it would only get better, even though my appraisal of the movie would remain the same, if not get worse. I could see myself enjoying watching it.
Yes, I can see myself watching it with you, enjoying it more without the idea that you have to do a podcast about it sort of hanging over your head.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's the kind of movie we have movies that we can't talk during, and we have movies we can talk during. And
yeah, this is a put it on in the background movie for sure.
Yeah. Okay, so that's number one.
Yeah.
Number two, I mentioned how they changed the ending. I'm going to posit that I might be full of shit because they changed the ending. And my problem with it is one of the only defining characteristics of Anne in the book is that she doesn't want to fucking live in Lawrenceville.
Mm-hmm.
And the movie basically says, that's not a thing. We're getting rid of that. But she does end the movie independent of Lyon Burke, who is the true villain of
Which
the piece.
is great.
And so is that better? Is the ending of the movie better than the ending of the book?
I mean, it may be. It may be better.
Like, it's abrupt and not satisfying, but it is...
At least it's not depressing.
Yeah, it's like a little less not satisfying than the book is.
At least it's not like her lying on the floor to eating handfuls of sleeping pills next to her like sweet sleeping baby.
I'm open to the movie being better than the book.
That's fair.
Yeah, I'm open to that. Even though they don't establish the relationships between the three women nearly as well as the book does, which is a weird thing for me to say because I thought the book was terrible. Okay, but here's number 3, and this is the most important thing. There's one bit of casting in this movie that is gold because there's a stage manager in this movie who's played by a baby Richard Dreyfuss. And he's adorable, and he's just a young man, fully like 8 years before he would make Jaws. Crazy.
Yeah.
But little Richard Dreyfuss showed up, and he was adorable for the one scene he was in.
It's great. Well, I got nothing else. Do you want to move on?
Yeah, let's move on really quick to Beyond the Valley of the Dolls, 1970.
Okay, I don't know what this is, so you're going to have to enlighten me.
This is a movie also, I mean, I would say that basically Russ Meyer looked at Jacqueline Susann's obsession with Jennifer North's breasts and said, oh, I can improve on that 100-fold. How much do you know about Russ Meyer?
I don't know anything about Russ Meyer.
Really salacious director who is obsessed with breasts.
Is this a porn?
It is not porn. No.
Is it a porn?
No, it is not porn. It just is a very sexy movie.
Sexy or sexist?
Both.
Cool.
Definitely both. But yeah, Beyond the Valley of the Dolls came out in 1970. The basic story behind it is Jacqueline Susann was working on a sequel, and she came up with the title Beyond the Valley of the Dolls, and then she was working with a screenwriter. 20th Century Fox, the studio releasing it, ultimately rejected the screenplay. But they still owned the title. So that allowed Russ Meyer to come in and shoot a completely different movie with the same title 3 years later, banking on the success of the first movie. I think I told you, but do you remember who scripted this movie?
Didn't Roger Ebert have something to do with this?
Roger Ebert wrote this movie.
Yeah.
Which is a weird thing to say. It came out and it's mostly about a band of, like, these women are in a band and they move to LA, and it has nothing, like...
Why are we talking about it? It has
because-
nothing to do with the Valley of the Dolls.
Because it was, like, released as a sequel.
Okay.
And it is not.
Okay.
And I just think it's worth
Kinda
talking
like
about.
Is it kind of like Troll 2?
Yes. Yeah, it's I think a lot like Troll 2. But I think the important thing about it is that after Jacqueline Susann died, I didn't realize how soon after Valley of the Dolls she died.
Oh, I don't know how.
She died like early 70s.
Oh, okay.
Her estate won $2 million in damages against Fox after Beyond the Valley of the Dolls came out.
All right.
So anyway, another 11 years pass.
It's 1981.
It is 1981, and we are blessed with Jacqueline Susann's Valley of the Dolls, 1981.
You know who's blessed with this? YouTube. This is a blessing. You should watch this immediately.
What a time to be alive.
What a time to be alive.
Just to be clear, we watched all of this. It was 4 hours and 45 minutes. It was a two-night movie event on CBS in 1981.
Every beautiful minute of it.
That aired on October 19th and 20th in 1981. It was 2 hours the first night. It was 3 hours the second night. And some beautiful soul.
Some hero. Let us build a statue.
Yep. Taped it. Someone who lived in LA taped it off their local CBS. And then decades later, it found its way to YouTube with all the original commercials and all of the original, like, interstitial ad stuff with, like, Connie Chung when she was still, like, local to LA.
Connie Chung. covering a story about how VHS recorders had just been deemed illegal.
You could not legally record something off of television. We're hearing on YouTube in the year 2020 from the year 1981.
And like a bunch of people that wanted, what was it? World
Dodgers
Series
tickets.
They
they
didn't
just
have
wanted
any?
Dodgers tickets. There's just apparently in 1981 there was a whole bunch of shitheads in LA who were camping out outside of Dodger Stadium,
Like screaming, "We want tickets!"
because
They didn't have any
there
tickets.
were no tickets for sale. And do you know why there were no tickets for sale?
They sold
They
them all.
sold all the tickets. Every seat was filled, and people were shitty
And going,
because
we're
they
not
didn't
leaving
get to
until
buy
we
one.
get tickets.
Anyway, all of
apparently
this
it was a big controversy.
all of this was more fun than the story.
Reagan had been shot like a month before.
Do you want to just go through all the ads we saw?
You wrote them down, so you go ahead.
We saw an ad for Trident starring Peggy Fleming. We saw an ad for Listerine starring Jeff Daniels. Lots of Connie Chung. There was an ad for an air purifier, I think, called Pollenex.
Okay.
Starring George Burns.
Okay.
Famous cigar smoker, George Burns.
Right. There were so many cigar and cigarette
Well, there's one we'll get to.
paraphernalia related ads.
Art Linkletter hosted he did a commercial for 4+1 glass cleaner. Linda Carter did a commercial for Maybelline. Orville Redenbacher did a commercial for Orville Redenbacher. This is when he was still kicking.
God bless him.
Which is super fun. This one was unfortunate. Bill Cosby for Speak and Spell, which is a huge fucking bummer.
Huge fucking bummer.
And then Brooke Shields for Wella Shampoo. But this was the commercial that was not starring a celebrity that really stuck out to us. A guy, okay, the way the commercial starts, a man is smoking a cigarette, and then he holds up a white cloth to his face, and he breathes out through the cloth, and then he turns the cloth around and shows it to the audience, shows it to the camera. And right where he breathed out, there is like this yellow spot.
Right.
It's really gross.
It's gross.
And you and I immediately thought, oh, this is clearly an anti-smoking ad.
Yeah, because it's gross to smoke.
Turns out it's an ad for Topol, not unrelated to Chaim Topol. Famous star of Fiddler on the Roof.
This is not a Tevye ad.
Yeah, Topol, a tooth polish, because the point of the ad is not, holy shit, what are you putting in your body? The point of the ad is, do you see what it did to this cloth? Imagine what it's doing to your teeth. We don't think you should stop smoking, but you should use our tooth polish to make sure your teeth don't look like shit. The commercials were fucking amazing.
Amazing.
It was great. But there was a movie that was happening during the commercials. Much in the same way that there's a game that happens between all the Super Bowl commercials, there was a movie event happening among all these commercials.
This was so much fun to watch. We spent like a whole day just watching.
This took multiple days.
It was so good.
Where do you want to start with this one? Oh,
Okay.
Can I skip ahead really quickly?
Sure.
Because I don't want to end on it because there's nothing to say.
Okay.
This wasn't the last version of Valley of the Dolls there was. In 1994, there was a 65-episode... Best as I can tell, it was a soap opera, but it was like a late-night half-hour soap opera.
Okay.
I think it aired like after Letterman in 94.
Okay.
So very, very late at night. It was co-created by Bill and Joe Lamond. Lamond? I think
I don't know.
does not matter. But it ran for 65 episodes. I tried to find episodes of it, and there aren't any. But it is Valley of the Dolls, and it's very 90s. You can see the intro. I'll link to it. It is gloriously 90s.
Okay.
But anyway, this is not the last one. If we could have watched the 94 one, we would have, but we couldn't, so we didn't. Do you want to talk about who's in it?
Well, I just want to talk about one thing really quickly first. This is not Valley of the Dolls. This is Valley of the Dolls 1981.
Best as I can tell, it wasn't the official title, but at the time, that's what they were calling it.
That's what they were calling it.
Yeah.
It is set in 1981. They have updated the story for modern times.
Mm-hmm.
So keep that in the back of your mind as we proceed.
I would almost define this as like not so much an adaptation as a remix.
Yeah.
Like
Because the names are the same.
The names are the same. Lots of the same things happen, but they all happen to different characters in different orders.
Yeah, it's weird. Like it was fun, but weird.
Like, for example, here's a thing they changed that makes it make less sense.
Okay.
Anne, in the original story and in the movie, everyone is telling her, you are beautiful. You should be a model. But she has no aspiration to be like an actress or be in front of cameras. She doesn't want to be famous.
Yeah.
She just wants to live in New York and work in New York. And it's the world she gets thrown into. So she's fighting against it for the longest time. But then finally she says, yes, I will model. I will become the Gillian Girl. And then she becomes like a household name.
Yeah.
But the reason they want her is because she is beautiful, but she's beautiful the way a normal woman can respond to and can
Yes.
identify with. She's not like Jennifer North.
Yes. So Anne is like aspirational, right?
Yes.
Like Anne is like, you if you wear this makeup, you could conceivably look like this woman. Jennifer North is like, nobody could ever look like this woman. She's amazing.
So in Jacqueline Suzanne's Valley of the Dolls 1981, who becomes the Gillian Girl?
Jennifer.
Why?
Which is, again, yes, not but like Jennifer in the 1981 version is kind of more of the girl next door type. Like she's kind of sporty, like I wouldn't say, like, listen, nothing against this actress. She's not like this ethereal, otherworldly beauty like Sharon Tate.
No,
like,
this is
just looks
Veronica Hamill, by
yeah,
the way.
she just looks like a model. Like she looks like a model.
But she looks like a model.
Yeah, but she looks like a sporty model. Like, you know what I mean?
But she looks like a model the way a model looked in the 80s.
Yes, that's what I mean. She looks like an 80s supermodel.
Yeah.
She looks like Cindy Crawford. That's kind of what she looks like.
Sure.
Okay. So, but Anne, this is a big change. Anne has an actual career. Anne is a lawyer.
She works at the Cetacean Institute.
She does not. She does not go to live in the future with whales. She is played by Catherine Hicks from Star Trek 4, the one with the whales. But she's a lawyer. She works for a film studio. She is the lawyer at the film studio.
So we're all out in LA at this point.
We're out in LA.
There's no New York in this.
There's no New York really at all.
There's like one shot in the movie where we see an exterior of New York and then we see an interior of Henry Bellamy like in New York, but then he's back in LA immediately.
There's a lot of Paris though.
Yeah, there's like exteriors of Paris and then there's shots of Jennifer on a soundstage.
Yeah. So Anna's a lawyer. She works for Henry Bellamy, who's the head of the studio. And as their relationship kind of progresses, she becomes sort of less involved with the legal stuff and more involved in like the production stuff because he likes her and kind of takes her under his wing.
He's like grooming her.
He's totally grooming her, and also they end up sleeping together because Lyon is a director. He's a director at the movie studio. He's like their best director. And he's directing a film with Helen Lawson.
Yeah.
Who is played by Gene Simmons.
Of Kiss.
Of Guys and Dolls.
Oh, yes.
So she's Helen Lawson, and the whole thing is like she's super jealous of the younger women playing younger roles in this movie, and it doesn't make sense.
What is this movie about?
We know it's called Fanfare, and it's a musical. We know there's singing and dancing, and Tony Pillar is in it.
Yeah.
And he has a song with Helen
Played by
Lawson.
Burt Convey,
and
who was the original Perchick on Fiddler on the Roof on Broadway.
Oh my God. And he's also got a disease. And
he's Huntington's in this, I think. Or do they never even say it?
What?
Do they say that he has Huntington's?
No, they don't say it.
Okay.
He just has a disorder.
Yeah.
Because Jennifer does have to get the abortion in this as well, but like she can't tell him why. Like they're engaged. It's this whole thing. So Jennifer's in the movie and she's like playing a part. Helen Lawson's not jealous of Jennifer. She's essentially jealous of this other role. She like won't even allow it to be cast. And Anne, working at the studio, says like, hey, my roommate is a good singer. She's like singing in clubs. Like she could play this part. So they all go out to see her. It's Neely.
By the way, at this point, we have not seen them actually be roommates.
Yes.
We, as the audience, have not met Neely until her show.
Right. So we meet Neely. My impression of who they want Neely to be in 1981 is Linda Ronstadt. That was the vibe I was getting from Neely, although not as good a singer as Linda Ronstadt. And they're like, Neely, Lyon's there, and he's like, Neely, you're great. Like, you're gonna be a big star. We're gonna cast you in this movie. So they cast her in this movie. She apparently sings one song and wins the Academy Award. She is
for
dating
supporting actress. They're a little realistic.
She wins the Academy Award for worst hairdo, because she shows up at the Oscars with this orange wig because she's dating the hairstylist.
She looks
now.
like she stepped off of a Candyland board.
Yeah. Because Ted Casablanca is the hairstylist on the movie, and he starts dating Neely and giving her drugs.
Mm-hmm.
And he immediately, and he thinks he's gonna make his name from like doing her hair.
Now I have a question for you.
Yes.
What do you think that there is a difference in the terms of the way, like in the way that drugs are presented in the original novel and the original movie versus the way they're presented in this, and maybe something about the way drugs, quote unquote, like had changed since the mid 60s to the early 80s?
Well, Neely's story so she was always like a drinker. Like she likes to drink. But she started getting put on like uppers and downers.
By the way, in honor, we have both been drinking scotch
We've
this
both been
entire
drinking
time,
scotch.
just
Yeah,
in
there's
honor
a lot
of
of
Valley
scotch.
of the Dolls.
So,
but
like,
just scotch, no pills.
Like no pills. So Neely's story is actually kind of similar. It's like, you know, you got to take the downers, the uppers to pep you up for your performance and the downers to get you to sleep. But Jennifer's story, I mean, my impression was that she's on hard street drugs. Like we see her buying what I think is cocaine from an old man at a newsstand in
An old
Paris.
French man in
And
a
I was
newsstand.
like, he's not selling her Secanols. Like these are bad drugs, I think, that she's taking. And so Jennifer meets Tony Pillar on the movie.
Yeah.
And learns from Miriam about this bad disease that he has, and she's pregnant, and he's just asked her to marry him and like go off on this like wonderful honeymoon. And she says to him, which I think anyone would feel that this was a weird thing to say to somebody, like they're gonna get married and they're like excited about having a baby, and she says like, I know like even as of yesterday we were so excited about having this baby, but having found out about his bad disease but like not wanting to tell him that she knows, maybe we should just like put a pause on the whole baby thing for right now. And he's like, wait, what do you mean? And he gets very aggressive about her desire to have an abortion.
Well, it's like two things that happen in a row where Anne and Jennifer both get dumped by their beaus.
Yeah.
And they're both super, super shitty.
Yes.
Like Anne gives Lyon like a bit of an ultimatum, and he says something incredibly mean and storms out of the conversation. And then Jennifer tells Tony, I am doing this, and he says something really shitty and storms out of the conversation.
Yeah.
And I feel like those scenes happen back to back.
Yeah, because Anne is basically told, Lyon is like, I'm going to London or whatever it is that he's doing. I'm going to go direct this movie. Like, if you come with me, like, we could get married. And she's like, I mean, we can get married. I'd love to do that. But like, I'm a lawyer. Like, I have a career. Like, I'm not going to London with you for months and months and just like sit there. Like, I have a job that I'm really excited about. And he's like, well, fuck you, sweetheart. And like had like basically is gone forever.
Yeah.
And this is the same kind of thing. Like she says, I don't feel like I'm ready to have this baby. Like I would like to have an abortion and still be with you. And that is not acceptable to him. And he says some very nasty things to her, which I won't repeat, and storms off. So she gets the abortion and then flies off to Paris and immediately falls prey to a predatory lesbian. Not much has changed in 20 years.
This is my recollection of the cut.
Yeah.
She is in the hospital.
Yes.
Gets led into the room ostensibly for the abortion. Cut. We are on the streets of Paris. Suddenly Jennifer is there looking terrible, walking up to a newsstand to buy drugs from the old French man.
And it was such an abrupt cut that my first thought was
maybe
like,
it was the person we've erected a statue to for taping this off TV fucked up.
No, it wasn't that. It was that I thought like plot wise that like something had gone wrong with the abortion and she needed like antibiotics, like she had an infection, like something was wrong. That, you know, because I guess I watched too much Call the Midwife. So I was thinking like, you know, back alley abortions, like she'd really injured her body in some way, but like the abortion was clearly done like in a hospital with a nurse and everything. So like that part of it was not relevant. Anyway.
By the way, just to be clear, like for those that haven't seen it, which I'm assuming is everyone, all of this stuff plays like an after-school special.
Yeah.
It really does. There's nothing even remotely realistic about anything that's happening. It really feels like you're being talked down to as an audience.
It really is. Like she's like, Tony, like I mean, maybe it could just be the two of us, and like we could try for another baby like another time. And he like stands up and in full voice goes, what? Are you saying you want to have an abortion? And it's like, oh my God. Okay. Yes, that is what she's saying. Yes. Anyway, she falls victim to a predatory lesbian who takes her into her home and treats her wonderfully.
She's not that predatory.
She's not that predatory. But she's a little predatory because like clearly like their girlfriend, Jennifer, does not seem interested in her at all. It definitely seems like the kind of thing where Jennifer is like, yes, do whatever you want with me. Like I've made it very clear I can never love you, but like I'm happy to live in your home and have you like clean me up from drugs. Mm-hmm. And then leaves because she feels that she has to go back to LA.
And, well, she also like Lyon comes to Paris after he's left Anne.
Yeah.
And then they meet and she goes back to L.A. and becomes the Gillian Girl.
The Gillian Girl.
And meets Kevin Gilmore, who's
Yes.
so she's with Kevin now, and
Yeah.
Anne's not with Kevin at this
not
point.
with Kevin.
But then she finds out about the cancer.
Because Anne's with Bellamy, if you recall. Anne's with
It's really
this gross
Well,
old
hang on.
ghoul.
You say gross old ghoul. This is James Coburn. This is movie star James Coburn. I would not be surprised if Catherine Hicks at the time was like, I'm fine with this.
Yes.
I'm fine with this because 15 years ago, I remember going to see in Flint and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Like, I know James Coburn.
There's just this scene, and this is just an artifact of the way it was taped. Like, nothing against James Coburn, but like, there's this scene where he like throws back his head and laughs, and you see all of his bottom teeth, and like the
Gums for days.
the shadows around his teeth make it look like he has fangs.
Well, it's also like we're watching a YouTube video of a VHS
no, I
from
understand.
1981.
Like, I understand. It was not it was not attractive.
But there's like two legitimate movie stars in this thing. It's like
Yeah.
there's James Coburn and there's Gene Simmons of Kiss. And can I just run through some of my notes?
Do you want to do the wig snatching?
Yeah, like let's do that, but there's something we have to talk about before the wig snatching.
Okay.
So it plays like an after-school special. Oh, no one else works for Henry other than Anne.
Just the lawyer.
Just
one
her.
lawyer.
He is the head of the studio. You never see him interacting with anyone else at the studio who works for him other than Anne and Lyon, one of his
and
directors.
like her friend Val, who I'm not sure what her job is.
It's ridiculous.
Does not matter.
But anyway, we're at the Oscars. Is it the Oscars? It's not the Oscars. It's like off-brand Oscars.
It's Oscars.
But the statuette is definitely like it looks like an
it's
Emmy.
like half an Emmy, half Oscar, and
Okay.
it does not matter.
So Neely wins for Best Supporting.
yeah.
And when she walks off stage with her award, she interacts with Helen Lawson, who is there to get a Lifetime Achievement Award.
Yes.
And Helen Lawson is there, and we're like, oh, they're going to have their altercation. They're going to have their hullabaloo.
Yeah.
And Neely does not thank Helen Lawson. She thanked everybody else. And Helen's like, hey, fuck you. You didn't thank me. And she says, yeah, well, I don't thank people who are pieces of shit. And
Which is fair.
Which is totally fair. Like Helen was terrible to her. And then they get in a little fight, and she pulls off Helen's wig. And then she runs away with it, and Helen chases her down the hallway, and she breaks into the bathroom where she is, and just in time for her to throw the wig in the toilet.
Book and both movies keep intact the scene of Neely putting the wig in the toilet. Everyone loves Neely putting the wig in the toilet.
And this TV movie does carry on two traditions that were started by the 1967 movie. We have a stagehand played by a baby-faced young actor. In this case,
Nathan Lane.
Baby Nathan Lane. It's adorable, and he speaks like Richard Dreyfuss in the 30 seconds of movie he's in is Richard Dreyfuss.
Yeah.
It's not like, oh, he doesn't even sound like Richard Dreyfuss. Like it is pure Richard Dreyfuss. This is pure Nathan Lane.
Yeah, and I can't do
a
a Nathan Lane impression, but he has a very distinctive voice.
It is Nathan Lane. It is one of those things too where I saw that he was in it before you did.
Yeah.
And then I said, oh, you got to wait for the stage manager. And then he came across, and he's unmistakable.
Yeah.
And this is 15 years before the Birdcage.
I mean, he's got like 3 good scenes.
Yeah.
Like he's not just like walking across the background. Like he has multiple lines in multiple scenes.
Yeah,
anyway,
featured extra.
featured extra.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So then that's one
Grand tradition.
one grand tradition that they've kept going.
2.
Helen looks fucking fantastic.
So good. She looks amazing. Like her hair underneath is just like a beautifully styled. And it's funny because they zoomed in for the close up and we were like, oh, that's the wig. Because she clearly has a wig on underneath the wig so that when the wig gets ripped off, the second hairdo looks fantastic. So she's got a gray wig, perfectly styled and beautiful. And I was laughing because I was like, that is not how you would put your hair if you had to put your hair under a wig. Like you would need to wear like a wig cap and like slick it back, whatever. It doesn't matter.
But this marks a really big change in Helen Lawson's
so
character.
Good. We fell in love with her in this moment.
Because she walks out on stage to accept her Lifetime Achievement Award. She makes a joke about how she has gray hair. And then we see her later in the movie, and she's like cool now.
She's still got the gray hair.
She's still Helen. She's still not perfect, but she's like, I'm going to embrace this. This
Yeah,
is fine.
I love it.
And they're like, no problem. This is fine.
She's like out to lunch with her gray hair, and they're
Yeah.
like, Helen, you've changed up your look. She's like, yeah, I actually kind of like it.
Yeah, no problem with
Why
that.
not?
No problem with that whatsoever. So Helen looks great. I have written gross in capital letters. Oh, that was when Anne bangs Henry Bellamy.
Oh, it was really gross.
Super gross. Linda Ronstadt, you already mentioned the Linda Ronstadt thing. Do you want to just skip to the ending?
Sure.
The ending is nothing. It is nothing. It is an arbitrary ending. The movie could have ended at any time.
Yeah.
It just decides to end here.
So Jennifer dies.
Yeah, Jennifer dies. Kevin's really sad.
Oh, right, because she's dating Kevin, and the whole thing in this is like she gets this really serious cancer diagnosis. The doctor is so mean to
Both
her.
the doctors. There's 2 doctors in the course of this whole thing, and
Yeah.
they're both terrible doctors.
Yeah.
And I looked at it, and I didn't know that HIPAA hadn't actually been passed until the 90s, because these doctors didn't seem like they gave a shit about HIPAA,
No, and
which makes sense.
The woman doctor was like,
The oncologist.
Like, the oncologist was, first of all, it's so funny. Like, everyone is like, I mean, I know what an oncologist is. Like, everyone knows what that is, don't they? Maybe in 1981 they didn't.
We can't take this stuff for granted.
I guess not. And
You know who's one of my favorite fictional oncologists of all time?
who? Robert Sean Leonard?
Yeah, Robert Sean Leonard in House.
There you go.
Yep. They're best friends.
I know. And she's given her this like very serious diagnosis, like hopeless diagnosis 30 seconds before. And then she's basically like, she doesn't even give her 1 second to like be sad about
Do you want to
it.
reenact it? Let's reenact it.
Yeah.
I'm the doctor. You be Jennifer.
Oh God. Okay.
You have terrible cancer. It is in your breasts and everywhere in your body. What we need to do right now, if we're going to take this seriously, is I need to cut your tits off.
Oh, I mean, wow, this is
Are you listening to me? You need to let me do this.
Is it possible to get a second opinion?
You're not listening to me at all. If you wanted to take this seriously, you would do the thing that I'm telling you to do right now.
I feel very sad and frightened.
We don't have time for that right now. I need to cut your tits off.
Can I talk to my friend, please?
Fuck your friend. That's essentially what happens in this movie.
That's essentially what happens.
It's very poor.
It's very poor. So anyway,
very poor.
She doesn't want to put Kevin through what he went through with his dead wife, because we've learned that she was
not through
sick.
all of it.
Yeah, like I guess I don't really get it. Like she doesn't want to die and leave him in the way that his wife died and left him. She doesn't want to prolong it.
Yeah, she doesn't want him to go through
like the
being
prolonged
with someone
suffering.
who is dying.
Yeah. Ugh. God,
Yeah.
it's just
She can't prevent him from losing her, but she can prevent him from it being prolonged.
I
from
hate
going through
it.
something prolonged.
I hate it.
Yeah, I didn't like it
it's
either.
upsetting.
But then we get to the end. So Jennifer's dead. Anne is basically the head of the studio, essentially.
And Neely's been through rehab.
But Anne and Lyon have gotten together. They got married.
They got
didn't
married.
They?
Yeah, they got
no
married.
Kids. There's no kids in
They
any
ran
of
off.
this.
Well, that's how she breaks up with Bellamy. Remember, she shows up at his door and she's like, "I just married Lyon."
Yeah.
Like he doesn't know that he's even like back in town, and
Right.
suddenly his girlfriend's broken up with him, and he's really cool about it, all things considered.
He's super. Well, that's the only thing that's accurate to the book is that Henry is just super cool with everything that Anne does forever.
Yes.
There's no drama with Henry whatsoever.
Yeah.
But then Lyon does shack up with Neely.
Yeah.
Because Neely's the worst. Neely's
worst.
always the worst.
She's
She's the worst in
terrible,
the book.
yeah.
She's the worst in the movie. She's the worst in this. Although Neely is given something that she's not given in any of the other ones.
What's that?
Tiny, tiny little bit of redemption at the end.
Mm-hmm.
Because she shacks up with Lyon. And Anne finds out about it. And Anne comes to the movie set. I mentioned before about how like the movie within a movie never makes sense.
It doesn't
These
make
are
any sense.
terrible movies that no one would ever go see. But anyway, coming back to this. So Lyon has shacked up with Neely. Anne has found out about it. Anne comes to the set to confront them. And she confronts them in the trailer. And Neely's like, oh shit, I'm going to leave. And she's been on drugs this entire time and everything's been really fucked up. There's also been this thing throughout the entire movie about how like we talked about this during Star is Born, where like you're going to portray someone as being incredibly famous and incredibly talented.
Yeah.
But if you can't portray them as being incredibly talented, it kind of breaks the reality
like,
of the
Neely's
story.
supposed to be like the biggest star, like this huge star, like huge overnight sensation. And we see her singing sometimes, and she's fine.
She's got a voice.
Yeah, she's
know?
fine.
We see her singing a couple times and she's okay. We see 20 people running at her to get her autograph.
Screaming.
And then she's on a couple of billboards.
Yeah.
Like that's the extent of Neely being famous in this. That's
Yes.
what they're doing to prove to us that she is the biggest star to ever happen. So anyway, they're in the trailer and she leaves. And Anne confronts Lyon. And this is their big change that they've made. Anne leaves him. And they walk out. And he's standing there with Neely, and Anne gets in her car and starts to drive away triumphant. And he says, well, at least I've got you, kid. And Neely says, no, you don't. I'm paraphrasing.
Yes.
And Neely gets her little redemption because she dumps Lyon too.
And that's the end of the movie.
And Lyon is just left by himself, still a very successful director, making a movie that I'm sure will be successful within the reality of this story, even though it's probably terrible.
But the movie just ends very abruptly with
Super abrupt.
after like 5 hours with Anne just like, I'm driving.
Yeah.
Here I go.
I think we need to end on the most important thing that happened in the course of Jacqueline Susann's Valley of the Dolls 1981, and then we can do some quadrants. Do you want to talk about, I mean, not the clothes in general. If you had to limit yourself to just one character's clothes in the course of this movie, who would you talk about for the subject of your TED Talk?
Oh, Anne's clothes in this are very strange. At one point I wrote down, you're a lawyer. Have some dignity. Like she's, at the beginning, she's in like a black suit and she looks like a lawyer.
Mm-hmm.
And then she never looks professional again.
She's just wearing costumes.
Yeah.
For the rest of it, she just went into costume, like a costume wardrobe, and just pulled out the most ridiculous things she could possibly find. And the thing is, I don't know if that's how people dressed in 1981.
I don't know either.
Because I'm not super invested in the early 80s as a time period. I don't know a lot about it.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Yeah.
This is a hoot, and it's free on YouTube.
Yeah.
And the commercials are glorious.
Unless Connie Chung catches up with them and makes them take it down. But, you know.
She's got other things she's worrying about.
She's fine.
Do you want to do some quadrants?
Let's do it.
Okay, so let's talk about 1967's Valley of the Dolls. Do you think they cared about the source material?
Oh, deeply.
I mean, apparently they did.
Apparently they did.
I mean, apparently Harlan Ellison cared enough that he quit over the fact that that he wanted to do the original ending.
There you go.
And they said no, and he said, no, you don't care about this as much as I do. No one's a bigger Valley of the Dolls fan than Harlan Ellison.
Apparently not.
Everyone knows that. Was it successful?
Yes.
Not in the way they wanted.
Okay.
And yet here we are.
And yet here we are, talking about it 50 years
this
later.
Very famous, beloved movie.
Yes.
That is also bad.
Yes.
And not well made.
Yes.
And a kind of a train wreck.
Correct.
But it is fun.
It's fun.
1981's Jacqueline Susann's Valley of the Dolls, 1981.
Yeah.
Do you think they cared about the source
No,
material?
of course they didn't.
They care about the book. Like,
No.
I'm sure they care about the movie.
Yeah.
Like, the movie was big. You know what? No, I would actually say they probably did care about the book because I bet everyone who made this probably did read the book.
Yes.
Because this is the audience for the book.
There you go.
Was it successful? No.
No.
No,
Of course it wasn't. It was terrible, but it was so much fun to watch.
Really, really fun. I'm going to link to it, and I hope it stays up forever, even though, according to Connie Chung, it was illegal. It was even taped off television.
It blew our mind. We're like sitting here going like, could they have ever imagined in 2021, as they taped this off the television in 1981, that two idiots would be sitting here watching it on YouTube for their podcast?
They would say, I have a lot of questions about the statement you just made.
And they would be like, are you from the future?
Well, this has been Adapter Parish. If you'd like to find us online, we're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at AdaptCast. You can join our groups on Facebook and Goodreads, and you can also find and follow me on Letterboxd. If you have anything to say that's longer than a tweet, you can always send an email to adapterparishcast@gmail.com. If you'd like to support the show, there are 3 great ways that you can do it. First, tell a friend. Second, a rating and review on your podcast platform of choice would be greatly appreciated. Third, we are on Patreon. This show will always be free, but if you become a patron, you can get access to Adapter Parish Plus, our bonus show that releases every other week between episodes of this show, and our patron-only Slack community. It's been a lot of fun, and all the details are at patreon.com/adaptcast.
Broadway doesn't go for pills and booze.
I mean, that's horseshit.
I mean, they do.
Helen, you look amazing,
I know.
by the way.
Look at my hair.
You
it's
look
great.
so good.
I know.
It's gorgeous.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.